My name is Isabella Whitlow, and this is the story of the day I thought my life would finally begin quietly, simply the way I had always dreamed. It was the morning of my wedding in Portland, Maine, a city that smelled of sea salt and coffee. The house I'd rented was small, painted a soft blue that reminded me of calm skies after rain. I'd chosen it because it felt honest, because it didn't try to impress anyone. The wooden floor creaked when I walked across it in bare feet, and the windows rattled when the ocean wind swept in. My dress hung neatly on the closet door, ivory and plain, with no lace or beads. Just fabric, clean and strong, like I wanted to feel inside. I woke early before the sun fully rose and made a pot of coffee. The air felt expectant, as if even the walls were holding their breath. I sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the steam curling from my cup, thinking about how this was supposed to be a good day, a new start. I had done everything on my own, every detail paid for with the money I earned working late nights at a marketing firm in Providence, Rhode Island. My fiancé, Jasper Rowan, was still at his friend's place across town, getting ready for the ceremony. We had planned to meet at noon. I remember thinking, this is it, Isabella. You did it. You're here. Then my phone buzzed, once, twice, and then again. I picked it up without worry at first. I thought it might be Jasper asking if I wanted him to bring flowers, or maybe Nina, my maid of honor, checking on the time. But when I saw the name at the top of the screen, my stomach twisted. It was my sister, Elise. Her message came in short, cold sentences. No one from our family is coming to your useless wedding. We're going on a trip to Hawaii. For a second, I thought it had to be a joke. I blinked at the screen, waiting for the punchline that never came. Then, before I could even type a word, a new notification popped up, a voice message from my mother. I pressed play with a shaking thumb. Her voice was soft but sharp, every syllable like a paper cut. Stay alone, Isabella. Your mind will heal. The words hit harder than I expected. I'd known for years that they looked at me differently, too serious, too practical, too unwilling to fund their whims. But to say that today of all days? It was cruelty dressed as advice. My chest burned. Without thinking, I typed back. Now you all are sleeping on the streets without my money. I hit send and tossed the phone onto the table. A part of me regretted it immediately. Another part of me didn't care. Within seconds, replies began to roll in, laughing emojis, one after another like a mockery. It wasn't even the words that hurt. It was the sound of that laughter in my head, the years of it. I turned the phone face down and stared across the small kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly, and on its door was a magnet that said America in bold red letters. I'd bought it from a gift shop in Boston years ago after my first solo trip. Above the sink, a tiny wooden shelf held a single postcard I'd found in a thrift shop, an old photo of a European street with the word Europe printed in gold script. I liked having both there, America and Europe, as if they were two corners of the world holding up my life. One was where I stood. The other was where I still dreamed of going, but today wasn't about travel. Today was about choosing my own ground to stand on. I walked through the house, touching everything like it might anchor me, the chipped paint of the doorframe, the soft rug I'd bought on sale for $38, the faint scent of salt and soap in the air. The world outside the window was gray, the kind of gray that can either mean peace or a storm. I wasn't sure which I was standing in. I told myself that I would still go through with it. Family or not, guests or not, I was still getting married. I was still going to walk down that aisle, even if it was only 10 steps in a small rented hall. Because for once I wanted to do something for myself, not for them. I picked up the phone again. 23 missed messages, all from Elise and my mother. One from my uncle, who I hadn't heard from in years. They're right, Isabella. Maybe you should think this through. I turned the phone off entirely. The silence that followed was heavy but clean, like the world had stopped shouting. I spent the next hour in quiet motion. I ironed my dress again, even though it was already perfect. I reheated my coffee, though I barely drank it. The house had old wooden walls that carried every sound, and in that stillness, even the ticking of the clock felt like a heartbeat. I told myself that this was what freedom sounded like. Then came a knock at the door. Nina, cheerful and firm as ever, holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street. I brought croissants, she said, stepping in before I could answer. You need to eat something before you faint in your own wedding. Photos. She was one of those people who could make chaos feel manageable. I didn't tell her about the messages. Not yet. Instead, I smiled and bit into the warm pastry, letting the butter and sugar fill the empty space where my anger had been. She noticed my quietness anyway. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Just nerves, I lied. She smiled softly and squeezed my hand. Well, nerves mean you care. When she went upstairs to check on the veil, I finally looked at myself in the mirror by the door. My reflection looked older than I felt tired eyes, but steady. I realized then that I wasn't sad because they weren't coming. I was sad because I had still expected them to. Even after everything, some part of me had hoped they'd show up. That hope I saw was the last thread tying me to them. And maybe today was the day I needed to let it break. I turned the phone back on once more, just to be sure, and saw a flood of notifications. 256 missed calls. It was absurd. My mother, my sister, unknown numbers, they'd filled the screen with their attempts to pull me back into their orbit. But I didn't answer. I wouldn't, not today. I placed the phone in the kitchen drawer, closed it, and whispered to the quiet air, let it rest. When I finally stepped outside, the wind caught my veil and lifted it slightly, like a small blessing. The world smelled of salt and possibility. My life, my real life, was waiting. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, that didn't scare me. The laughter, the messages, the 256 missed calls, they were all behind me now, trapped inside a silenced phone. Ahead of me was a future that I would build with my own hands, one calm day at a time. And as I walked down the short path toward the waiting car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace that didn't ask permission. The day of the wedding arrived cold and silver. The harbor air in Portland, Maine, smelled like salt and nettle, the kind of sharp scent that wakes you up even if you hardly slept. I remember standing by the window of my little rented house, staring out at the street where the early mist gathered between the parked cars. My dress hung behind me, and my hands were trembling, not from fear but from some deep electricity, like my life was about to be rewritten. By 10 o'clock, Nina Hale arrived. She burst through the door with her usual brightness, carrying a bag full of hairpins and granola bars. You look calm, she said, setting everything down on the counter. Too calm. Are you secretly planning to run away? I laughed, though the sound came out soft and uneven. No, Nina, I've done enough running. She started curling my hair while humming some old pop song. I watched her reflection in the mirror and thought about how good it felt to have one person who didn't make everything a transaction. She was there because she wanted to be, not because she owed or expected anything. When we finished, she took a step back and smiled at me through the mirror. You look like yourself, she said. In the best way. Her words settled in me like warmth in cold air. At noon, the car arrived. Jasper's friend Damon Cole, who happened to also be a reverend, drove us to the small hall near the harbor. The building was a converted boathouse, painted white with tall windows that faced the sea. Inside, a dozen chairs had been set in neat rows, and on a small table sat a vase of yellow tulips that Jasper had picked up from a roadside stand for $14. The light streaming through the glass made the room glow faintly gold. When I walked in, Jasper was already there, waiting near the window. He turned when he heard the door open. For a moment, the whole room seemed to hold still. He looked simple, honest dark suit, no tie, hair slightly out of place. When he smiled, it wasn't the movie kind of smile. It was the steady, quiet one that said, I'm here. I stayed. We didn't make any grand speeches. Damon, standing behind a small podium, cleared his throat and said, We're here to witness the joining of two people who have chosen each other with open eyes. It wasn't poetic, but it was real, and that was enough for me. Around us sat 12 people, friends, not family. Ruthie Hart, my old neighbor from Providence, had driven 6 hours just to be here. She winked at me as I walked down the short aisle. Miguel Santos, the baker who always saved me the last cinnamon roll for $2, had brought a paper box tied with a string. Wedding cake substitute, he whispered with a grin. I wanted to hug them all. Still, in the quiet between words, I thought of my phone. I'd left it turned off in Nina's bag, but the ghost of it followed me. I could almost feel the weight of those 256 missed calls, the sharp edge of my mother's voice, the bitterness of my sister's laughter. I thought of every dollar I'd sent them over the years: $200 for their electric bill, $650 for Elise's car repair, $1,400 when mother said the roof was leaking. Each transfer had been like a bandage over a wound that never healed. Damon asked us to say our vows. I had written mine the night before in the quiet of the kitchen, with only the sound of the refrigerator humming behind me. The words came back to me now, clear and calm. I choose a life without shouting. I choose honesty over pride. I choose a calm home and a kind voice. I choose today, not the past. When I finished, Jasper squeezed my hands. His eyes were bright but steady. "Isabella," he said, "I promise you a house where the doors don't slam. I promise to listen even when I'm tired. I promise that we'll never use silence as punishment. I choose you because you make quiet feel full," Nina sniffed. Ruthie clapped once, forgetting the ceremony's usual stillness, and everyone laughed. When Damon declared us married, the sound of the sea slipped in through the open door, soft and rhythmic. We signed the papers on a wobbly table that smelled faintly of varnish. Jasper kissed my cheek, and in that second, the world felt like it had space for me again. Outside, the wind had picked up. The harbor flags flapped like restless birds. We decided to walk the few blocks to the diner where we had planned our small reception, a low-roofed place called Elan's Harbor Grill, where the owner knew Jasper from his boat repair jobs. The sign outside flickered between Ellen's and L's because one bulb was dead, and I loved that imperfection. We sat in a corner booth under a framed map of New England, and I ordered tomato soup and grilled cheese. Jasper had clam chowder. The total came to $41, and he paid in cash, sliding the bills under the salt shaker. The waitress, an older woman named Georgia, smiled when she saw my dress. "Newlyweds?" she asked. We nodded. "Congratulations, sweetheart. You picked a good man. He tips well." Jasper laughed and added another $5 to the table. The soup was thick and warm. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I'd finished half of it. Each spoonful felt like something steady after a storm. Halfway through lunch, Nina slid my purse across the table. "You might want to check this," she said softly. I hesitated, then took out my phone. When I powered it on, the screen lit up like a firework: messages, missed calls, voicemails. My sister's name appeared first. "Elise, pick up," her message read. "It's urgent." Then one from my mother. "Answer now." My heartbeat quickened. I could have opened the messages, could have let their drama rush in, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at Jasper, at his calm face, and the way he was watching me with quiet patience. "I'll deal with it tomorrow," I said, sliding the phone back into the bag. "Not today." He nodded. "Good," he said simply, and went back to his chowder. After lunch, we walked along the waterfront. The sky had turned pale blue, and a few gulls swooped low over the docks. My veil caught in the wind, fluttering like a flag of surrender, but not to them, to peace itself. Jasper took my hand, and we passed a street musician playing a harmonica. I dropped a $5 bill into his open case, and he smiled without missing a note. That night, we stayed at a small inn on 4th Street, in a room with a view of the harbor. The bed creaked, and the heater rattled like an old friend, but it was perfect. I stood by the window while Jasper unpacked the cake Miguel had given us. The city lights shimmered on the water, and for a brief moment I thought about my family again, where they were, what they might be saying. Then I let it go. Jasper called from the table. "You coming?" I turned around. He had 2 forks in his hands and a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Yeah," I said, walking toward him. "I'm here," and for the first time in my life, that sentence felt completely true. 2 months after the wedding, Jasper and I left the gray skies of Maine behind and drove west, chasing clearer light. The highway stretched open before us like an unwritten page. Every few hours, we switched seats. He would drive while I read aloud from paperbacks we picked up at gas stations. Somewhere outside Columbus, Ohio, I remember saying, "This feels like we're starting a book no one else gets to edit." He smiled and said, "Then let's make it a long one." We reached Denver, Colorado, just as winter was tipping into spring. The city looked enormous to me, full of flat sunlight and snow-capped edges. We found our house 2 days later. A small one-story place on East 14th Avenue, with peeling white paint, a crooked mailbox, and a yellow front door that seemed to glow even when the sky turned gray. I fell in love with it immediately. It looked like hope that refused to fade. The seller, Evelyn Carr, was 83 years old, small and sharp-eyed. She had lived there for 60 years and had kept the place spotless. On the day she handed me the keys, she said, "This house likes people who talk kindly inside its walls." "You keep it that way, dear," then she cried, a single tear that ran quickly down her cheek. I promised her I would take care of it. We paid $312,000 for the house, our savings pooled and carefully counted, every dollar hard-earned. That number felt sacred to me, so I wrote it on an index card and taped it inside the kitchen cabinet, a reminder of what we were building from scratch. The first few weeks were a blur of boxes and paint. We spent evenings unpacking while the radio played low jazz. Jasper sanded the floorboards himself, saying he wanted to know every inch of the house by touch. I painted the walls soft cream and left the yellow door untouched. It was perfect the way it was. I found a job at the Capitol View Library near Cheeseman Park. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like home. The air there smelled of paper and polish, and the quiet was the kind that heals. I wore a name tag and recommended novels to anyone who looked lost. My favorites were the lonely readers, the teenagers who came after school to sit in the back corner, or the mothers who whispered stories to restless toddlers during story hour. I learned their names, their habits, their silences. When I stamped due dates on books, the sound felt like time moving forward in small, steady beats. Meanwhile, the calls began again. At first, I didn't recognize the numbers' different area codes, strange names, but I knew the voices. My family had found new phones, maybe borrowed from friends, maybe hidden behind apps. The voicemails were long and winding. My sister Elise said their Hawaii trip had gone wrong, that the hotel overcharged them, that they missed their flight back, that she had pawned her bracelet for cab fare. Then came my mother, her tone soft and pitiful. "We need your help, Isabella," she said. "Just a few hundred. You know, we'd do the same for you." They wouldn't. They never had. By the second month, their requests grew specific. $900 by Friday, Elise said in one message. "That's all we need to get back on our feet." Then another message a week later, $1,200 by Monday. "Isabella, please, you owe us that much." They started using guilt like a currency. "You ruined the family name when you married without us," my mother said in one recording. "At least you can do the right thing now," I never answered. I deleted each message like a prayer for peace. But their words still clung to me, the way cigarette smoke sticks to curtains even after you wash them. Then one gray evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Gerald Pike, our mail carrier, standing on the porch with a large, overstuffed envelope in his hands.
"Came through forwarding," he said. "Rochester address, right?" I nodded.
He tipped his hat and left. I brought the envelope inside and sat on the kitchen floor to open it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, old and slightly curled. There was one of me at 6 years old, wearing a red coat and clutching a snowball. Another of Elise, younger than her smile wide and her front tooth missing. And one of my mother's, Ruth Whitlow, standing at the stove in our old house, her hair pinned back, stirring soup. The sight of it made my throat tighten. On the back of one photo, in Elise's familiar slanted handwriting, were the words, "We're still your family." I don't remember how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe more. I cried quietly, the kind of crying that doesn't even make a sound. Because real love should never be a bill. It shouldn't come with deadlines and amounts. I realized I had spent most of my adult life trying to buy peace, when peace was something you built, not purchased. When the tears finally slowed, I stood up and pulled a notepad from the drawer. At the top, I wrote "our budget" in big block letters. Below it, I listed mortgage, utilities, groceries, savings. At the very bottom, I wrote one final line: "No more money to people who hurt me." I underlined it twice. That night, I pinned the note to the corkboard beside the refrigerator. Next to it, I placed the 2 postcards I had carried from house to house, one that said America in red, and another, older one, that said Europe in faded gold. I like to imagine they were compass points north and west, guiding me somewhere steady. The days began to find rhythm. Morning smelled of coffee and lemon cleaner. Jasper left early for work at the boat repair shop he joined on the edge of the city, where they fixed motorboats for the mountain lakes. I spent afternoons shelving books and listening to the hum of quiet conversations. In the evenings, we sat on the small porch under the hanging light, sometimes with music, sometimes with silence. Still, some nights the phone rang, unknown numbers. I'd watch the screen glow on the counter and feel that old ache rise again, but I never answered. Each time I let it ring, it lost a little more power. One Saturday, I took a long walk through our neighborhood. Children rode bikes in circles, and someone down the street was grilling. When I came home, the yellow door caught the sunlight just right. It looked almost alive, like it was breathing. I touched the wood, warm beneath my palm, and thought, this is mine now. That night I made tea and wrote in my journal. Maybe healing, I wrote, isn't about forgetting people. Maybe it's about remembering myself. Jasper found me there, sitting cross-legged on the rug. You're quiet, he said. I'm peaceful, I answered. And for the first time in years, both things meant the same. Spring arrived gently in Denver, turning the snow along the sidewalks into clear little rivers that whispered as they ran. The trees outside our yellow door unfurled their first leaves, pale and trembling, and every morning I woke a little earlier just to watch the light slip across the kitchen wall. It had been half a year since the wedding, and peace was finally starting to feel like something I could hold. One morning, I made coffee in the chipped $6 mug I'd bought on Colfax Avenue, then sat at the table with my phone. The black screen stared back, full of names I'd been avoiding. Elise, mother, and even Uncle Henry, who had never called me unless someone needed money. Dozens of messages waited pleas, demands, guilt woven through every word. I read the first few lines and stopped. They were always the same. Help us, Isabella. You owe us this. Family doesn't ignore family. This time I didn't cry. I just started typing. I heard you. I remember the wedding day. I remember the 256 missed calls. I remember how you laughed when I said I would stop paying. I am done. I am not a wallet. I am a person. Please do not call me again. I hit send. The silence that followed felt heavy and holy. Then I blocked every number, each one a small act of freedom. I changed my ringtone to a soft chime, a sound that reminded me of glass tapping lightly in the wind. That afternoon, Jasper and I painted the living room. The color was called Gentle Sand, and the name alone made me exhale. The smell of paint filled the house while sunlight slid through the curtains in long golden lines. Our friend Laurel Green from the library dropped by with a fern in a clay pot, the price tag still on it, $18. She laughed when I pointed it out. Some people bring wine. I bring receipts. We spent the evening eating grilled cheese sandwiches on the floor, our plates balanced on paint cans. The house looked different, warmer, safer. When Laurel left, Jasper stood beside me, staring at the freshly painted wall. It feels new, he said.
It is, I answered.
We talked about small things we wanted to do. Hang shelves, plant herbs in the yard, maybe drive to Santa Fe one weekend to see the art markets. Nothing grand, just simple plans that sounded like peace. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked quietly through the house, touching the cool wall, the yellow door, the edge of the table. I thought about my family, not with anger but with a strange kind of pity. They had built their world on taking, and now that I'd stopped giving, they had nothing left to lean on. I whispered a quiet wish for them, that they would someday learn what enough felt like. Then I went back to bed. In the weeks that followed, the silence stayed. No calls, no new messages. The absence of their noise became its own comfort. I started writing again small letters I never sent. One to my mother, telling her I was happy even without her blessing. One to Elise, explaining that love without boundaries isn't love, it's surrender. I folded them both and tucked them into the drawer beside my journal. Life began to bloom in little ways. I learned how to bake bread, badly at first, then well enough that the kitchen smelled sweet on Sunday mornings. On Saturdays, Jasper and I went to the farmer's market downtown and bought honey from a woman named Darla, who always added an extra spoonful just because she liked Jasper's dimples. Evenings were quiet. We'd sit on the porch, sharing tea, watching the street fade into dusk. Sometimes we didn't speak at all, and the silence felt like music. By summer, I realized I hadn't thought about my family in weeks. The wound had turned into a scar visible, but no longer sore. When Jasper suggested hanging a small sign above the front door, I said yes. We found one at a local craft fair, the Whitlows, Est, 2025. It cost $22, hand-painted in soft green letters. When he nailed it up, sunlight caught on the edges, and I thought, this is my new beginning. That night, I wrote one last line in my journal before turning off the light. I married a good man. I kept my vows. I kept my money. I kept my peace. Outside, the crickets hummed, and the house settled into its steady rhythm. The yellow door glowed faintly under the porch light, like a small promise. The world beyond it kept spinning loud, complicated, restless, but inside everything was still. Stillness, I realized, wasn't loneliness. It was safety, it was a strength. It was the quiet sound of a woman who had finally, completely cut them out of her life forever.